So the first session that we're going to have is, like I said, called the Game Changers, Transformation of the Asian Sports Arena. And we have four wonderful guests here who are going to share their experiences with us. In no particular order, Mr. Richard Seow, Chairman, Sports Singapore. Mr. Sam Ahmed, Group Head, Marketing, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa for MasterCard. Mr. Sundar Raman, the Chief Operating Officer for the Indian Premier League. And there's one person who doesn't need too much of an introduction, Vijay. So I'm going to invite them on stage. So Richard, Sam, Sundar, Vijay, if I could request you to join me on stage. And while they're settling in, ladies and gentlemen, I have to make a very special announcement. All of you watch tennis on television? You know Alan Wilkins? Okay, I've had the privilege of playing cricket with Alan Wilkins at the cricket club. And you know that like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, Ted and Barney, Alan Wilkins and Vijay Amritraj are a pair. And Alan Wilkins is getting married today, and Vijay gave up being at that wedding to be here. I come from this wonderful city called Chennai, which Vijay also comes from. And yesterday, or was it today, Vijay? Today or yesterday? Was the 375th anniversary of Chennai. And Vijay was receiving an award as a doyen of Chennai. And he gave that up to be here with us. And so I'd really, Vijay, thank you very much for coming. I mean, it's not that, you know, it's really wonderful that you're doing that. Sundar flew in from Dubai at 7:30 in the morning and made it out here. Richard's got like 18 sports events, and Sam pays the bills, so I mean, that's okay. So we need people who pay the bills. So I'm going to go out there and start with them. So one of the best things the moderator can do is just leave it to the panelists and get out of the way. So I'm just going to ask them a few questions and let them bring their very, very different perspectives to you. For those of you who may not know the people out there, I'm just going to do a very, very short one-line introduction. Richard is chairman of Sports Singapore. He is the head honcho for sport in Singapore. No better person who can tell us about sport. But he has a few other things to his credit as well. He is actually a track and field star. He's a winner of the Sword of Honor from the Singapore Armed Forces. He's also been a banker, but we'll forgive him that. Pierce, sorry, the banking jokes continue. And Sundar is the COO of the IPL. He's been one of the people who actually founded, you know, he was at the table when it was started, and he's been responsible for building it into one of the great sports brands of Asia. And Sam is a person who's been involved in sport from the client side and the sponsorship side in various companies. I mean, he's been with Kraft, he's been with Starbucks, he's been with MasterCard, and a lot of his time. And you know, his father was actually a fairly famous Pakistani cricketer. So he actually has sports in his blood, and he has now, you know, the bank in his pocket to pay for all the rest of us to enjoy this. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask them one question. The fundamental thing that seems to have happened over the last 15 years is that sports is creating a completely new identity. Most of us today actually seem to be very much fans or, you know, members of tribes of, like, you know, we follow Manchester United and Liverpool, though we live far away. It's the same thing with the IPL. We have people who are fanatic about Federer versus Nadal. You're seeing this with the F1 and Ferrari and McLaren. How is sports defining identity for people today? I mean, have we given up, you know, in all these global citizens that we're becoming, are we starting to identify more through sports with things? What are the changes that you guys are seeing? Richard, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you very much for the kind invite. And for those of you who have traveled into Singapore, welcome to Singapore. And I hope that while you're here, you not only just shop in the lovely Raffles City, but you get out, play some sport, and please do come and visit our new national stadium, which we're very proud of, which we've just opened. I've explained to some of the visitors I've had a chance to speak with this morning, the stadium was purpose-built for four sports: cricket, track and field, rugby, and football. So hopefully those of you who come here will have the opportunity to partake and participate and spectate at the new National Stadium. And really, one of the reasons why it was built was this whole aspect of sport being tribal in nature. And so much of the sport that we consume is imported. So when I go around town and I talk to people, I get fans of Manchester United, fans of Arsenal, and myself, a fan of Chelsea. But we have to search and dig a little bit deeper to find more homegrown things. So it's wonderful that IPL can come out. It's wonderful that we're starting to see different sports that are indigenous and that our intellectual property is owned here. So in Singapore, we've built the stadiums, and we're hoping to work with promoters, with agents, with sponsors to create new, unique product. So one of the first unique products that we've created is World Club Rugby 10s, which was the first event to be held at the National Stadium, which is the intellectual property based in Singapore. So we're looking at doing things like that. We'd love to do it with tennis. We'd love to do it with cricket. We'd love to do it with football. But until we get there, we're in the midst of bringing in new events. So we will have in October the WTA Finals, which will be a tremendous event. And if you haven't got your tickets yet, please rush out. sporthubtix.com. Tickets are selling very fast, so please do and get your tickets there. We'll have Brazil play Japan in football in November. So these tribes are starting to come up, but we would like to see more indigenous tribes come out from sport.
And Vijay, you've seen this now for many years in tennis, and you've seen this whole thing through multiple sport, actually. I mean, you're not just a tennis player. So how do you see this whole thing? Why are people's identities so consumed with sportsmen?
Well, I think first, let me just start by saying yesterday evening was a spectacular evening, and what an amazing event this is. My first visit to this event, it's absolutely outstanding. No better place to have it than in Singapore, of course. I'm very glad that there are people that I've met amongst most of you here who know so much about the game, and I would find it very difficult to introduce any one of you to ESPN because my job, I'll be out of a job. Last night, I found that I can't afford to introduce Piyush either to ESPN because his interview with the Prime Minister, I think I was listening more to him than I was listening to the PM. He proved very clearly last night that he's not a banker.
Piyush.
But coming back to change, I think the first thing that I always say about sport is that all families should, really be a part of a sport, of any kind of sport, because it really builds character in the individual, it gives confidence to the child, and it gives the ability to communicate more than anything else. I think sport is one of those things that transcends everything else. It doesn't matter how big you are, how small you are, what religion you are, what color you are, and so on and so forth, and what background you come from. I think the important thing about sport that it actually develops you as a human being and builds character in you. Now, you can certainly play sport for exercise and for togetherness, which I always say about families. I think you can play in competitions, which can be domestic and local, when you play within your own provinces or states within a large country like India, that I come from. And then when you leave our shores and try to play sport and compete overseas, and that's when the equation completely changes. And now you have to really kind of decide whether you really want to do this or not. And that's where in Asia, all across Asia to a great extent, is where we are stumped. Because it is a very, very aggressive approach to put your life into being an athlete. Because there is no guarantee. And the changes we see happening over the time since I played the sport and in our sport to what it is today, and we've compared it to hockey, to badminton, to football, to a variety of other sports. And I think we see here that the sport is starting to get away from us in Asia from a domestic standpoint. If we take perhaps one or two sports out of the equation, like badminton, where we are so strong in Asia, the issue of becoming a professional athlete is a very, very dangerous thing to do, simply because it's highly risky. The ROI on it is very, very poor. And if you're talking about being in business of any kind, that's the first thing you look at. And when you invest 10 into it, you expect to get 20 out of it. And here, you could invest 10 years into a sport, and 99% of the time, it doesn't give you what you really want out of it. But if we look at it from a different direction and say that it builds you as an individual, the children that I've seen here this morning even, are wonderfully confident, they're wonderfully have great desire in the sport, but more than anything else, even if they didn't become the next Nadal or a Sampras or a Federer, I think the important thing is it will help them in their future, it will help them in their lifestyle, it will help them in their health, and more than anything else, it will help them communicate and be good citizens in the towns they live in. So I really do believe that sport needs to be a part of everyone's family business, so to speak, pretty much 3-4 times a week. And whatever he or she does, it's important for parents to understand that the child needs to have a sport as part of their background.
And that's very interesting, both of you. You mentioned indigenous tribes, you mentioned about sport, and it's a hard choice in careers. And Sundar, I'd like to ask you, do you see, I mean, I think the IPL is one example of an indigenous thing. I know cricket is big in India, but do you see people and parents actually saying, let my son be an IPL star, I don't mind if he doesn't study? I mean, is that kind of thing happening in the IPL and cricket in India? I mean, are people, is it less risky now? I mean,
it's a little more insured now. If you look at what the recent surveys at least have indicated, when you're at an age when you're 17, 18, 19, just about finishing your education, you make career choices. And Vijay is right. It is difficult to put your rest of your life on risk for a career in sport which is going to last you possibly 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, and if you are such in 25 years. But the risk of an injury, the risk of your inability to perform at the highest level means your rest of your career is gone. That is changing today a fair bit, thanks to the IPL in regards to cricket. More mothers and more parents are willing to let their children take up cricket as a professional sport because the entry-level pay is higher than possibly national average, is higher than what an average salary in a metro city is today. And that has to happen as the sport evolves. More and more people are able to make a career out of the sport. What's in it for sports administrators like us? What do we look at? I mean, clearly the performance of the national team is very, very important. But
come on, India, national team, performance?
World champion still.
We're clutching at straws here, but anyway.
The fact is, if you look at the early part of the administrator's role, it is the national team's performance. But are we also keeping our eye on, are more people playing the sport? Are more people watching the sport? Are more people wanting to play the sport? At 3 different levels. It may not be at the highest level. You may not aspire to become, as Vijay said, a Nadal or a Federer or a Sachin Tendulkar or a Dhoni. But the minute you start to play the sport, it changes you as an individual. But it is also bringing in a new fan to the sport. It is also bringing in a new conversation to the family. It is also bringing in a new lifestyle to you. And therefore, you're growing the sport by getting more people to watch. And that's what we've been able to do reasonably successfully. And that's where the tribalism comes in. And you started off the question saying, is it getting tribal? And both of you are from Chennai. Maybe 10 years ago, Chennai was known for the city of superstars. The superstar, the only one. But today it's known for Super King and superstars. And I think that's where tribalism starts. You start to follow the city, and hopefully one day on the streets of London, streets of Manhattan, you will have somebody wearing a Mumbai Indians jersey or a KKR jersey and walking on the street with great amount of pride. And I think that's when we would have made the league more global and united a set of fans through a philosophy. Either it is through an icon in terms of leadership, or in terms of the belief of a team, or in terms of the brand of sport or brand of cricket that they play. If you're able to get that done, I think we've done a reasonably good job, and technology is only helping it. It's breaking down barriers, it's breaking down boundaries. So irrespective of where you're sitting today, you're able to have a conversation and unite with a set of people in that conversation about your tribalism, about your support for the teams.
That brings me to an interesting question. And Sam, your company sponsors a lot of teams, leagues, clubs. Why do we wear those T-shirts? I mean, what is it about, why would I want to wear Man U on my thing, or Liverpool? I mean, Man U is not a Liverpool, I'm a Liverpool fan. So.
Yeah. That's a great question, and it's something that we think about deeply every day. Sports fundamentally and tribalism goes down to a basic human need. And there's 3 things. Number 1, we want to belong to something, and something bigger than us. And number 2, there is a wider spectrum of families, and these tribes are family. You're a part of a family. Now, families typically go through drama, They go through real-time experiences, and it's very unscripted. You cannot script your family. You can script your business life, even some of your personal life, but your family you cannot. And the drama around sport and the real time around sport is the part that we like to tap into, number one. Number two, the reaction to that drama is real time with sport. The ability to watch a live event on TV or at the event is incredible. When you replay that event, it's not as exciting. Now, the thing with sport is when we have these incredible events with hundreds of thousands of people at the sporting game, the drama that then drives at home, now on new technology, social, digital devices, has completely exploded. And I think the tribalism in Asia has reflected our affluent growth and also the technology growth within the societies that we live in. To give you an example, we in Asia Pacific now spend $13 billion a year on sports sponsorship as a category. That is now on par with Europe. 10 years ago, we were 40% below Europe in sponsorship spend, which is an incredible shift. Now the EPL TV rights cost more in Asia Pacific than they do in Europe.
Wow.
So the transformation to Asia in this tribalism has been incredible.
And you've seen this with all the things that Singapore is trying to do around different kinds of sport, right? So are you seeing this with the F1 and the way it is? It's the same thing, it's the same economics in F1, isn't it? That Asia is the main earner for the sport.
I think it has certainly transformed, and attention certainly has come to Asia. I think in the case of Singapore, the government has been an early adopter, early investor, and the government has had to seed. So when you look at events like F1, WTA finals, it wouldn't happen without the government coming in and deciding that this was something that they would invest in. So the question is, why do they invest? They invest certainly for social impact, for sporting impact, but ultimately it must be for economic impact. So all of these things at the end of the day, while they have early venture funding from the government, they must be able to withstand the vagaries of competition. They must be able to stand on their own. And the business models, to use Vijay's term, you have to have the ROI here. So the government can't do it, and we'd like to see private sector, and it's great that the likes of MasterCard, DBS come in and try and support sport. And so I think that's wonderful for all of us, and we hope more companies do.